Okay, once again, welcome to the Sunday Sheffield as Bill sees it meeting. This is a main chair meeting, and today it's with lots of gratitude that we welcome back John C., who's coming for month 3 of his Expanding God Consciousness workshop, Awakening to Faith, Leap of Faith, Cultivating Belief in a Higher Power, for up to 60 minutes, and then we'll open up for sharings or questions. So, John, thanks again for coming. It's over to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, John. It's a joy to be with each of you. And this is to me is a very special moment. It's a sacred moment. The sacred moment where we're going to have a dialogue, a conversation around a higher power. And even though that a higher power exists and we acknowledge the belief of a higher power, what happens with human beings that we have to bring to the present that the higher power does exist and that he is within us, between us, and in other people. So let's just take a moment, as is indicated in the moment of silence, to get very present to the present moment. And if you don't know how to do that, just simply pay attention to your breath. And as you inhale and exhale, what that does is actually bring you to the present moment. It's quite simple, really. If you need some additional things, we could do a body scan together where, you can feel your feet on the floor, feel the back of the chair, feel your shoulders. These are things that bring us to the present moment. And what occurs in the present moment is everything. You see, the past is no longer exists. It is an illusion. Future hasn't happened yet, so it's an illusion. The only thing that we can do as a human being is to live life fully in the present moment. But because of our wandering minds, we need to remind ourselves to get present. And through the use of the breath, paying attention to your breath, and through body scans, we then can adjust ourselves in the present moment. And why is the present moment so important? Well, this was where life is. This is where belief begins. This is where we encounter something that we call a higher power. So let me give you a brief introduction of myself, first of all, and maybe why you should listen to what my experience will be shared with you. I am from Canada here, and it is morning. I've been in AA for over 51 years. I've been sober for 51 years, and I have practiced these steps to the best of my ability, in and out kind of things. So I deliberately practice them most of the time, and sometimes I did not. I kind of call that the zigzag of recovery. So what I'm about to share with you is my experience. I don't for one moment think that this is the way that you should do anything. My purpose really is to share my experience. So what I have done in prepare for this talk is really try to cleanse as much as I can to not to raise the ire or prejudice of anybody, because I recognize this is such an intimate conversation when we're talking about God and spirit, and many of us have opinions about that, judgments about that. But at the same time, I need to be ethically clear about what I do and what I'm doing in today. So my hope is that I don't alienate anybody. My hope is that you'll hear this as my experience rather than me telling you to do something, because I have no intention of telling you to do anything. But I would like to give you, as much as I possibly can, the benefit of the years of experience in attempting to describe this journey, which is mystical, oftentimes confusing rather, and not certain where my life is leading. So where does this kind of start? We come to Alcoholics Anonymous because we're powerless. That word is a big word. We're powerless over alcohol. Our lives are unmanageable, which indicates that I have little control over most of what happens to me. Powerless. I lack the ability to accomplish things. I'm powerless. So this is a great position to be in, because what we're doing is that you'll find that it's a simple process to allow and let go, but it's difficult. It's a paradox. Why? Because we listen to our false self, our egos, the thing that is created by us living life. Now, the ego in itself isn't bad. Like most people think the ego is bad and it has to be get rid of. You can't get rid of your ego. But what you can do is to begin to understand that an ego exists. And at times it pulls us away from the spiritual journey. And when we recognize that, we then can make a choice. You see, we got to remember that we can choose in what we notice. So the ego itself is not bad, but sometimes if we listen to it in certain places to do certain things, it draws us away from this spiritual prize of peace and joy. So just to recognize that, that's all. You don't want to force it. You don't want to avoid the ego. You just want to be with it. And at times listen to the wisdom that's derived from the experience. But at the same time, there's another place that we can look, and that is in our intuitive self. So all of this starts with the belief of something. How do we develop beliefs? What do you think beliefs really mean? And today's topic is really about the leap of faith, cultivating a belief in a higher power. So that it calls to mind that in the second step we take, came to believe, which implies a journey. You see, it implies a journey, and it's in the past tense, which is remarkable. So how do we go about coming to believe in a power where we at times have been so self-directed, so self-determined, that we've ignored the possibility of a creator or a first cause of anything? See, this is the leap that one makes to invite a power greater than ourselves into our life. Now, I want you to imagine with me for a moment, I want you to be reflective. And what that means is going inside. And I want you to imagine a life that you're living right now. And that life is centered in the belief that all is well. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, what happens when it isn't well? What happens when I'm in pain, I'm disappointed, I'm frustrated, or I think so poorly of myself? So life isn't well in those moments. But it could be, oddly enough. It could be because we could take a perspective that if there is a higher power, and if this higher power is our advocate, and if we allow this higher power to take its place in our lives, no matter what confronts us, no matter how we feel, no matter what we think, we know that we're on a spiritual journey and we are protected by the idea that we're being cared for by this higher power. So imagine what life would be like, moment by moment, that you had that idea centered in your head, that you are absolutely convinced that you're cared for by this higher power. What would life be like for you? What would you be thinking about yourself? Where would the worry, concern, upset be in relationship to the idea that all is well? You see, life would be so much better, wouldn't it? We would have a higher quality of well-being. We will know that we have purpose and meaning because, after all, we're being cared for. In our third step, we made a decision to turn our life and our will over the care of God. Simply means that we have allowed God into our lives to help direct us, and with us being convinced that we're being cared for. Now, isn't that a beautiful way to live? But sometimes there's a discrepancy from our belief to what I just said. And that gap is actually there. And I want you to know that that gap is okay. There's nothing wrong with that gap. All it is encouraging us to develop a relationship where we have yet to have a relationship. So what are we talking about when we're talking about faith and belief? What are we really referring to? Is it grace that gives us this? Or is it a human construct? Well, I like to think it's both. That we've been given the possibility to believe in anything. And if you can imagine your belief systems right now, you believe a whole bunch of things that you don't really know much about, but you believe it to be true. And that's what we want to get to when we're talking about a belief in a higher power. You see, when I first read this idea of about a belief in a higher power, I went right to trying to know the higher power through reading books and studying scriptures and doing all kinds of things to put myself in a place of authority. I had to know, a need to know. And yet the second step so clearly says, which I missed for some reason, is to believe something. And to believe something means not to know something. Knowing isn't necessarily need to be there. We just come to believe. So we can imagine walking in our recovery journey, which is a zigzag journey. It's not a straight line. That things are going to befall us no matter if we're sober or drunk. Life is going to happen. Storms are going to occur. But who we are in the midst of a storm will determine the quality of your life when there isn't a storm. See, all things are well. All things are working towards good in the world that I live in. Sure, I have disappointments. I have reversals. I have had deaths and sicknesses around me. All kinds of things that's happened to me in my lifetime. But I know this, underneath all of that I'm being cared for and protected. This is the kind of basis in which we want to continue our journey in the 12 steps. So we want to cultivate this. But first, we want to acknowledge the fact that it is a gift. You see, one of the things we're talking about powerlessness, in other words, we use the word surrender. You see, we surrender to something. We give up something. We sacrifice something. We sacrifice something for something better. So when I talk about giving my will over to the care of God, I'm not just giving my will over, I am receiving God's will. You see, I'm making room, in a sense, to God's will to operate in me. Now, this is a big change for a person who's only directed for most of his adult life by self-will. By self-centeredness, really defining what I want and what I need. To let go of that is not an easy thing to do. But it is the best thing to do. Because I'm giving up my little power and what I think I control in life, which isn't a lot. But there is some things I do control. But generally speaking, there's a lot I cannot control. So I'm giving up this illusion of control so that there is room for the will of God to operate in my life. Now, this is what happens. We use words like will so often, you willing. But what is will? And I like to define will as a causing of something. So in my self-will, I am trying to cause something in me or in other people, a certain change. But my self-will is limited. It's like a muscle. It weakens quickly. Now, anybody that's been on a diet recognizes this as a truth. In the morning, you're full of resolve, and in the afternoon, you're having cookies. And what you discover is that your self-will is limited. And therefore, it is not as useful as what it can be. Self-will isn't bad, by the way. We need it. We need to embrace it. but we also need to recognize its limits. What we're doing is giving up our self-will and having God's will, which is power. That's why Wilson calls this in an introduction, this idea of a higher power. Yeah, first, not to alienate any of the religious views and judgments that we have and prejudice that we have, but also to indicate we were powerless, and now we have a power that is not our own, that is so powerful that will move us through life. See, that's exciting, isn't it? Well, we don't have to rely on this temporary and limited power of our own, that we can simply allow this higher power to actually activate or cause things in our life. So how does one get there? Well, let's take the position of this first of all. Maybe God provides us the grace to develop this belief. So am I open to the possibility that there is a transfer of faith coming from a higher power, and all I have to do is to allow it to occur? Just to allow it, just to notice it, just to imagine it happening. Now, of course, when we're talking about this idea of believing, what we want to do is to expand the boundaries of our belief. And I'm often touched by the prayer that I pray often, and it says something like this: God, I believe, but help my unbelief. I want to be able to step into my belief system knowing that God is going to protect me, even though I may be uncomfortable, upset, frustrated, or even worried. That I am being cared for, and therefore I can let go of all those implications, those ego-related implications, knowing that I can walk freely and choose wisely because I believe that God is directing me in my day-to-day activity. So, I could cite you all kinds of biblical scriptures about this idea, and I won't. But the idea exists in the human experience that God is there and available to us to provide this gift of belief. So let's take it from a position of a human construct. In other words, we are responsible for the expanding of belief. What occurred to me is over time, as I began to continue my work in meetings and people and hearing their experience and listening to my experience, that culmination resulted in a certain belief that there's certain things I thought was impossible to me became possible. And over time, I kind of absorbed that just by almost like osmosis, that I came to believe in greater things than I did when I first came into the program. And that is perfectly okay. But what I'm about to share with you is something that we can put on a fast track if we choose to, that we can enjoy this freedom of believing that God is the center of who we are and is providing gifts for us as we speak, which I call the sacred identity. Each of us have sacred identity, no matter what our history is, no matter how many times we've hurt other people, no matter how we've disappointed others, no matter the anger that we have felt, that each of us have a sacred identities that are based in values. Now, if I use the words like love, kindness, gentleness, empathy, compassion, understanding, you would understand what I would mean. You would understand an experience of each of those words, not just the words. And because you understand the experience of those words, simply means there's a place in you that has them. They are embedded in you. You've been gifted by those things. This is what development of a conscious contact of God will expand this idea that we can actually activate those values and we can manifest them in our lives. Now, imagine again, if you would, go inside when I'm sharing this experience with you and try to be in the present moment. That if you got up this morning and your heart was full of love and compassion, and that you've acknowledged that, thank you, God, for this gift of love and compassion. And you got up and you did the things you would normally do, speak to the people that you would normally speak to, reach out to the people that you would reach out to, go to work and do your job. But now you've added this idea of love to each of the things that you're doing. Each of the conversations you're having, you can't help but be connected to another human being in a very intimate way. So your ideas become less important. They become important. They are no longer objects. There is something that you want to connect and unite with. And you have this overwhelming feeling that you care for someone else. Can you imagine day in and day out walking through life with that kind of heart? See, that's what's possible. What benefit would that be for you and for the world? That you're absolutely convinced that this power is working in you so that you can be an effective human being. That's what's available, friends. Not our idiosyncrasies, well, I'm bad or I'm not good enough, or, I've done some very bad things in my life. No. This is about today. It's not about yesterday. Yes, we can draw on their past experiences to see how it can help other people, but we're no longer emotionally entangled or being defined by them because we've been set free by a belief and a power that has allowed us to walk free. So this is no small matter. We often hear around the rooms that, God has done for me what I could never do for myself. And one clear example of that is sobriety. How can a drunk, so obsessed about drinking alcohol that it's the only thing that we would do or think would be normal to escape the pain in which we're feeling and to obliterate any responsibilities we have about ourselves and about other people? One day, something occurred that had us here today. That is miraculous. And I think all of us would agree the ability to stay sober today is a miracle. It is not of our own doing. Because if you were like me, I tried every avenue to either control or quit my drinking with no success. Then I was introduced to these 12 steps, and all of a sudden, you know what? Not only was I successful through the grace of God, but I'm able to spend a lifetime here sharing my experience in sobriety. That's a miracle. Now you take that miracle and imagine transforming how you can process all your emotions, all your thinking, and funnel it for good use. See, that is what we call today emotional sobriety. The processing, not the containment, not the getting stuck with, not engaging in these difficulties, but kind of wiping our eyes, turning our eyeballs from the inside out to the world so that we can be of service. How does that occur? How does that get started? Well, I like to think it starts with belief. I like to think that we need help. We recognize that we need help. And all we have to do is to invite this power into our lives so that we can walk free. I often use the metaphor because you can't explain the experience of God. You really can't. And if you think you can explain the experience of God, then that's not God. That's a quote from St. Augustine. So people have been challenging with these ideas all these generations. So God is a mystery. The more I try to know God is like me trying to understand God. And the more I understand God, the less God becomes God. And the image of that looks more like me. So if I know God, if I think I know God, and if I think I know the boundaries of this belief, then what I've done is reduce God to mirror image of John. And I don't want to do that. Why would I want to do that? Because I recognize that my power is limited and temporary. So I want to pull myself into this spiritual experience where there is no limit to power. Why wouldn't I? You know, I often think about how can I best describe that experience? And I use simple metaphors to get my head around the idea of what's actually occurring. And the metaphor I like to think about is I'm in the ocean drowning. And I'm flailing around in the water, trying to keep my head above water. And somebody in a ship is throwing me a life preserver. And I'm throwing it back because I don't like the color. I don't like the way it looks. Meanwhile, I'm drowning. See, that's what it's like in my spiritual world. I want to accept whatever life preserver is being thrown to me and be okay with it. You see, we cannot predict how our life is going. We cannot. We are going to run into separations, divorces, bankruptcies, financial reverses, bad health. These are all things that, as human beings, that we need to face. And how we face them determines the quality of our well-being. So to have this kind of advocate, this kind of belief system, will only help us through those miserable times, those times of storms. So, you know, some people say that belief suggests the faith that rises from cognitive and emotional processes that can be seen as coping mechanisms or a way to fulfill the need for security and belonging. So that's a perspective some people have. So what does it mean? Well, it can mean that we need to examine what our belief systems actually are, where our belief systems end. You know, if you don't believe in God, then what do you believe in? If you believe in God as a giver of requests that you have, and that's it, what kind of power is that for you? Either you're going all in or you're dipping your toe in the water. And to quote something that I have some feelings towards, but I'll quote it anyway, either God is everything or he's nothing. So what we're really speaking about in this environment is not a simple, every so often, I'm going to believe that there is a God. It's about drenching ourselves. It is about going in over our heads with the belief God is central to our lives. So how does one get, what are the tools that one can use? Well, self-reflection is being one of them. You know, identify your core values. What's important to you? What is it you value in your life? And reflect on those values that are important to you, such as honesty, compassion, integrity, and freedom. Understand the influences. Consider how your family, culture, experiences, and educations have shaped your current beliefs. How did you get there? What's been your journey? How did you discover that you had those values? And who placed those values in you to begin with? Reflection helps identify and expand your belief system. Explore different perspectives. You can study philosophy about religions or scientific perspectives, books and articles and documentaries. And we have some that are beautifully written in AA that we get to examine in the stories of another human being, how they were transported from a hopeless drunk to a thriving human being. Engage in those kinds of conversations. Be interested in the transformative process of the 12 steps. We want to be able to evaluate our beliefs critically. Questioning beliefs, ask yourself, why do you hold certain beliefs, or whether they stand up to scrutiny? Because sometimes what happens with beliefs is that they are not objective truths. They arrived at a place in our lives through maybe years of misjudging the circumstance or experience, or misjudging ourselves, or we don't have complete information. So we want to be able to stand to scrutinize, to see what beliefs interfere with the quality of our lives. So we begin to see it for what it is, a lie. That there truly is no containment other than our conditioning as we grew up. And to look at those beliefs, whether they might be a belief like I'm not good enough, example. How one arrives at that is through a series of events and conclusions and judgments. Not consciously, by the way, but how it occurs. And we come to a place to say, you know what, I'm just not good enough. I look at that person over here, they have so much, that person over there can speak so well, that person up there has everything that they ever wanted. And we begin to use those beliefs as if it were true. But what we're ignoring is the sacred identity that's been placed in us, especially for us, based in our experience and our richness of who we are as a human being. And we want to be able to tackle those kinds of beliefs and identify it as, no, this is a myth. I've come to this conclusion through irrational thinking. And once we start breaking down those beliefs, we begin to see where they contain us and stop us or slow us down. We say, well, I'm just lazy. I'm not interested. Well, that belief is derived in the way in which we interpret moving forward. And because now we put a label on ourselves, now we must live it out. But to take that belief and say, well, wait a second here. I'm not lazy. I may have some behaviors that prevent me from working as hard as what I can, but that's not who I am. I have an advocate. I have a power greater than myself working, providing me with the grace to move forward, uninhibited, to be a fully functioning human being. This is not our dream. Isn't that what we tried to find in alcohol? To be fully functioning, to feel good about ourselves, to have the kind of self-esteem that we can walk proudly like kings and queens that we are. This is what we've been searching for. And this is where we find it. And it is in the development of our beliefs that will shape our self-image, which will shape our thoughts, which will shape our feelings, and ultimately shapes our behavior. A belief. Is this belief I have about this certain area, is it empowering or disempowering? And you'll know once you start looking at it. And the disempowering things are something that I could refer to as being conditioned. It is the cost of growing up, living life. but we've also created those beliefs. We also can untangle those beliefs. You see, I think, let me speak for myself. I needed to stop condemning myself, identifying with my weaknesses and character defects as if they define who I am. None of which is true, by the way. Yes, I have defects of character, but that's not who I am. I have certain behaviors at times that I'd be embarrassed to share with you. Yes, those things do occur. But I am shaped by this idea that God has provided me something that knows the difference between those kinds of behaviors and the empowering behaviors in which I could utilize if I so wish to. This is what it takes, friends, is cultivating a belief in which each of us have available to us if we're willing to work towards it. Then we want to articulate, we want to become clear about these beliefs in which we're developing. We want to be able to invest ourselves. And what strikes me, and over the many years that I've been in this program, how much time, in a sense, that I wasted by resisting the idea that I should bring to bear what I actually believe. Because that requires writing, journaling, getting in touch with the experience that I'm actually having, not the experience I'm trying to hide from, but to be able to expose the experience I'm having, to be truthful about the experience I'm having, to help me define what the beliefs there that shape my self-image. See, this requires work. It could happen over time without what I'm suggesting here. But if you wanted it to happen quickly, to invest yourself in who you're being, maybe you want to create a personal manifesto. I call them personal mission statements. And if some of you that have worked with me know that that's what I promote, that each of us can write a manifesto about who we are. What do we stand for? What do we rely and depend on? Is it our feelings? Is it circumstances? Is it our thoughts? Do I stand for something different? Do I stand for the heart space that exists in every human being? This intuitiveness, this internal wisdom, this grace, if you like, that's moving clearly in me, through you, in you, moving each of us to a place of well-being. Am I going to invest myself? Is this important enough for me to sit down and get clear about my current beliefs? Am I going to integrate and practice these beliefs? You see, one of the things I enjoy about looking back at my life was how I confused knowing something and actually practicing something. See, my brain, I guess, maybe was at a place where, because I know it, therefore I must have practiced it. Because I know it, I could repeat it, I could articulate it. But when I examined my experience around it, I found that I wasn't in action with it. So yes, I had a knowledge of it. Just to give you the best experience of what I have with that, I read so many books on meditation as an example, because it was important to me. So I read these books on meditation, so I could tell you how to meditate. But I couldn't share the experience of meditation because all I had was head knowledge. You see, I didn't know enough then that the only thing that I could really share with you is my experience. And if I wasn't experiencing it, how could I possibly share it with you? So there's a separation between head and heart. The separation is this brain I have is at times is not only unreliable, but is self-defeating. the heart space, the experience of something, the body never lies. It is incapable of lying, and it is more trustworthy. And the only way I can develop that heart space is through a practice of something. So if I believe in God, if I believe in a higher power that has saved me from a life of drunkenness, that has put in my path a miracle that I could never have done myself, am I prepared to practice that belief in other areas of my life? And of course, the answer to this rhetorical question, oh, yes, absolutely. But we have to examine the actions. Am I acting like it? Or do I get upset with everything that really doesn't go my way? Or when I get disappointed, I get overwhelmed. Where is this idea that God is all is well here? And it's okay to say to myself that I haven't really practiced this. This is good. There's nothing to condemn yourself or judge yourself. It is only something to bear witness that you can improve on. Because now you're having insight. You're becoming clear about your experience rather than what you know. So define your beliefs. Put them to the test. See where you're using them. See where you don't use them. And expand them. So we integrate and practice. And of course, we have such a natural place to share this with is in our communities, in our meetings. To be able to listen to people's conversions and transformation stories. Many people, everybody, in fact, has wonderful transformative stories. That they were this way once, and what happened to them, and now how they're being this way today. That is the structure in how we listen and speak into reality about our experiences. Now, human beings strive to have certainty. You ever notice that? Safety and security is very high in a human being. We want to be able to feel secure. But of course, life is not certain. I often think about, I'm at age 76. I'm not entitled to my next breath. It's uncertain. Why is it uncertain? Because I have no control over how long I live. Yes, I have contributing factors that will help me live longer, but it doesn't necessarily mean I live long. So I need to embrace this idea that life is uncertain. And I need to be okay with the mystery of living life. And the reason why I'm okay with it is because I revert back to my belief that all is well. That this God is providing me care. And no matter what occurs in my life, no matter the circumstances, no matter how I feel or think, all is well. So, if you're interested in really hurrying this along in your life, you take a value inventory. Discover your sacred identity through your values. And prioritize what are the top 5 values that you have. For me, I have a lifelong learning, a spiritual journey. I have this idea of integrity. When I say I'm going to do something, I do it. These are values in which I've identified that are important to me. Now I take those values as a personal manifesto, and I look for places where I can actually activate those values. So what's transpired over the years is I became very interested in connecting with human beings. And this was from a person who thought to themselves to be self-centered. And somehow or another, what is connected now is I have a very high interest in unity, in community, and understanding another human being without judgment. See, that's the beauty of this personal manifesto, that we work towards instituting these values in our day-to-day activities. So, what are 10 statements, or a few statements I could use to help me in my journey in belief? I could say things like this: I feel deep sense of peace and contentment, even during challenging times. See, that is an indication of where my belief actually lies. It isn't in the challenging times, it is in the deep sense that I have peace and contentment that's available to me in challenging times. It indicates that you trust in God's plan and that you're aligned with his guidance. So this statement, although appears to be, I don't know, it might appear to be, well, I don't believe it. But you work the statement until you do believe it. You see, we came to believe. We're on this journey of believing. So just because you don't believe it today doesn't necessarily mean if you practice it, you won't believe it tomorrow. Opportunities and resources appear when I need them most. This suggests that God is providing your needs and guiding your path. These are reminders of ourselves not to get caught in the dilemma of this world. That there is a direction, there is a path, there is a cause, there is an advocate, there is a spirit within us that's directing us. Third statement might be something like, I experience a sense of purpose and direction in my daily activities. You see, you're noticing something now, where before maybe you weren't noticing it. Maybe you were good enough to have a list of to-dos, and you might be, striking them out as you move forward. These are very good things to do, by the way. But to add your sense of purpose and direction in each of those things, now you just added God into your life. Feeling purposeful often means that you're following God's will in your life. And one would feel very good about doing that. I encountered people who offer wisdom and support just when I need it. So another way of saying that, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. It's another way of describing that experience. And this can be a sign that God is working through others to help you. So we begin to see that there's some experiences in behind the unconscious or behind the conscious mind that's operating that you can't see, touch, or feel. But there's some kind of organization that's happened. I am able to forgive and move past old hurts more easily today. God's direction often leads us to emotional healing and forgiveness. See, these sentences which I'm offering you, if applied in practice, will change the way in which you believe. And after all, isn't that what we're looking for? Aren't we looking for freedom? Freedom from our addiction, freedom from our emotions, freedom from our negative thinking, so that we can live fully and experience life in a way that we could never do before. Friends, I am just about out of time. I'm not going to do the rest of these sentences, but I think I've given you some ideas on how to develop them. You're probably using some ideas of these things could be as simple as God willing. Would you come here tomorrow? Well, God willing, I will be. By saying that, what you're suggesting to yourself and to other people that you're being directed and guided. These are little clues that help us expand and deepen our beliefs in a higher power that has gifted us with something very unique and beautiful called a sacred identity, that we can get in touch with our values and live congruently with those values, so our expression in life is to have purpose in meaning and be in service of other people. I'll turn this meeting back to the chairperson. Thank you for your generous listening.